There are moments in life that split everything into before and after. For me, those moments were clear. My first teaching job, meeting Thomas, the love of my life, the day our daughter Rachel was born, and now, this moment, standing in my kitchen, staring at my only child as she calmly tells me she's mortgaged my home, the house Thomas and I spent 40 years building a life in without my knowledge or consent. Rachel didn't even flinch as she spoke. Her tone was flat, almost businesslike, as if she were discussing the weather. "He needed it more than you do, Mum," she said, referring to her husband, Ethan. "Ethan's startup has real potential. You're sick. He's only 4. He still has decades of earning ahead of him." I stood there, stunned, my hands gripping the edge of the kitchen counter to keep myself steady. For a moment, I couldn't even recognize the woman standing in front of me. This wasn't the same Rachel who used to cry when she accidentally stepped on a caterpillar, the little girl who baked cookies with me on rainy afternoons, or the teenager who volunteered at the local nursing home every summer. This was someone cold, calculating, a stranger wearing my daughter's face. For 47 long days, I had been at the hospital by Thomas's side, watching cancer slowly take him away from me. 40-7 days of holding his hand, moistening his lips with a damp sponge, reading his favorite poems out loud when pain kept him awake at night. 40-7 days of praying for just a little more time during all that time. Rachel came to visit exactly 3 times, always with an excuse. The kids had activities. Ethan had important meetings. There was always something. While I sat there, watching my husband of 46 years fade away, my daughter had been busy gathering my financial documents, forging my signature, and using my home, my one piece of real security, to get a loan for Ethan's latest business idea. "The payments are only $17.50 a month," Rachel continued casually, as if she were talking about a cable bill. "It'll just be for a year or 2. Once Ethan's company takes off, we'll pay it all back. My teacher's pension is $2,300 a month. That mortgage payment would leave me with just $450 to cover food, utilities, insurance, and everything else." I took a deep breath and tried to keep my voice steady. "Rachel, this is my home, my only real asset. You had no right to do this." She didn't hesitate, didn't apologize. "Dad would have wanted to invest in family," she interrupted smoothly, using the same line she always did when she wanted something. Thomas was generous to a fault. For years, he believed in supporting Rachel and Ethan, even when it hurt us financially. But after their 3rd failed business venture cost us over $120,000 from our retirement savings, he had finally said enough. I met her gaze, my voice quiet but firm. "Your father would never have approved of you mortgaging my house behind my back. Not while he was lying in a hospital bed, fighting for his life." For a moment, something in Rachel's expression shifted. The mask slipped, and I saw it, the hardness underneath. Then it was gone. "Well, it's done now," she said, her tone sharp. "The papers are signed. The money's been transferred. Ethan's company is already moving forward. You'll just have to manage the payments for now." A strange calm settled over me, like the eye of a storm. For 42 years, my entire identity had been wrapped around being Rachel's mother. I'd made excuses for her mistakes, believed in her goodness, and put her needs above my own always. But in that moment, standing in my kitchen, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't just Rachel's mom anymore. I was Margaret Hayes again, the woman I used to be before motherhood, strong, capable, and no one's fool. "I see," I said softly, reaching for my purse. Inside it was my wallet, my phone, and a letter I'd received the day before. A letter from the life insurance company confirming the $750,000 policy that Thomas and I had kept secret all these years. Knowing how reckless Rachel and Ethan could be with money, Rachel mistook my calm for surrender. Her shoulders relaxed. "I knew you'd understand," she said with a relieved smile. "Once Ethan's company takes off, we'll be able to take care of you properly." I looked around my kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd cooked thousands of meals, where Thomas and I danced on our 40th anniversary, where Rachel once announced her engagement with tears of joy. Now, every memory felt tainted. I turned to her, my voice low but clear. "Then don't complain about what happens next. What does that mean?" She called after me as I walked to the door, a trace of uncertainty creeping into her tone. "Mum, where are you going?" I didn't answer. The door closed behind me with a soft click, but inside me, something roared to life. I sat in my car. The sensible Honda Thomas had insisted on buying new for me 3 years ago. Despite Rachel suggesting that at your age, Mum, a used car makes more sense. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "Mom, you're overreacting. Come back so we can discuss this rationally." I silenced the phone and started the engine. As I drove away, I saw Rachel standing at the window, watching me. Her face was a mix of confusion and irritation. She had never seen this version of me before. The woman I was before I became someone's wife and someone's mother. Margaret Hayes. 68 years old, widow, betrayed by her only child. I drove with no destination in mind. Just the certainty that I could no longer sit idly by while my daughter destroyed everything Thomas and I had built. Rachel and Ethan thought they were dealing with a grieving, fragile widow. They were about to find out how wrong they were. The Harborview Motel sat on the edge of town, its faded blue paint peeling and its neon sign flickering. It wasn't fancy, but it was far enough from home that no one would think to look for me there. I paid cash for 3 nights. The clerk barely glanced at me, though I caught the curiosity in his eyes. A woman my age, alone, checking into a place like this. It wasn't the usual clientele. Room 12 was small and plain. A worn floral comforter on the bed, a little table and 2 chairs. A bathroom with towels so thin you could practically see through them. It reminded me of the tiny apartment Thomas and I had shared after college. Back when life was simple and full of possibility. I set my purse on the bed and checked my phone. 17 missed calls from Rachel. 3 from Ethan. 1 text from my neighbor. Linda. Rachel came by looking for you. Seemed upset. Everything okay? I replied quickly, taking some time to myself. Please don't tell Rachel anything for now. Linda, a widow herself for 5 years, responded almost immediately. Understood. Here. If you need me. To her simple kindness brought tears to my eyes. The first I'd allowed myself to shed since discovering Rachel's betrayal. I sat on the edge of the bed and let the reality of it all sink in. Thomas was gone. Rachel had stolen from me in a way I couldn't have imagined. And now, instead of enjoying a peaceful retirement, I was facing financial ruin. But those tears didn't last long. I've never been one to wallow in self-pity. Thomas used to tease me about it. "Margaret doesn't cry for long," he'd say proudly. "She just finds a solution." And that's what I needed now, a solution. I took out my old laptop, the one I used for lesson plans back when I was teaching, and began to work by midnight. I had a plan forming. 3 steps. Legal. Find out exactly what Rachel had done and whether I could challenge it. Financial. Protect the money from Thomas's life insurance before Rachel could get her hands on it. Information. Learn everything I could about Ethan's so-called company. To understand what I was really up against. Rachel and Ethan thought they had me cornered. They had no idea the fight I was about to bring to their doorstep. As I closed the laptop and lay back on the stiff motel bed, my father's voice echoed in my memory. "Margaret," he used to say, "in business, information is power, and timing is everything." Rachel's first mistake was betraying me. Her second mistake would be underestimating me. Morning came early, bringing with it a cold determination I hadn't felt in years. I woke in the small motel room to the thin light creeping through faded curtains. For a moment, I almost forgot where I was and why. Then reality came rushing back like a tidal wave. Thomas was gone. Rachel and Ethan had betrayed me and my home. The house where I'd built a lifetime of memories was no longer truly mine. I sat up, brushed the tears from my cheeks, and told myself the same thing I used to tell my students before a big exam. Focus on the next step, not the whole mountain. I showered quickly, packed up my notes and laptop, and left the motel with a cup of bitter coffee and a packaged muffin from the vending machine. My first stop was Coastal Community Bank, the local bank where Thomas and I had kept our accounts for decades. The branch manager, Marian Jenkins, had known me for over 20 years. She attended the same church as Thomas and me, and we'd served on the library board together for a time. When she saw me walk in, her face softened with sympathy. "Margaret, I was so sorry to hear about Thomas," she said warmly. "How are you holding up?" "Managing one day at a time," I replied, keeping my tone even. I didn't want to linger on grief. Not here, not now. "Marian, I need to talk about some account changes. Can we speak privately?" "Of course," she said immediately, leading me to her small office and closing the door behind us. Once we were seated, I took a deep breath and laid out the situation calmly. Factually, even though my heart was pounding the entire time. I told her about the fraudulent mortgage, about Rachel's betrayal, about Ethan's so-called business venture. Marian's expression shifted from shock to anger. "Margaret," she said firmly, "this is a textbook case of financial exploitation. As a bank manager, I'm required to report this to Adult Protective Services. It's considered elder financial abuse." I blinked. I hadn't thought of it in those terms, but of course, she was right. "I understand," I said quietly, "and I appreciate that. In the meantime, I need to secure whatever assets I still have." "Absolutely," she said, her hands already moving over the keyboard. "Let's review your accounts." Over the next hour, we went through everything piece by piece. Our main checking account, which was now in my name only, had $4,278. Our savings account held $12,350. There was a certificate of deposit with $35,000, set to mature in 3 months, and then there was the most important piece, the $750,000 life insurance check I deposited just the day before. It was on a standard 5-day hold before the funds became available. Rachel was a signer on the checking account for emergencies back when Thomas and I traveled, I explained. "I need her authorization removed immediately." "Consider it done," Marian said. Working quickly, she glanced up at me with a reassuring smile. "I've also placed a security flag on all your accounts. Any future transactions will require extra verification." I let out a shaky breath, some of the tension leaving my shoulders. "Thank you, Marian. I can't tell you how much this means." She hesitated for a moment, then said softly, "Margaret, I've known you, Thomas, and Rachel for 2 decades. I never would have expected this from her. Neither would I." The words caught in my throat, but I managed to speak them. Neither would I as I was leaving the bank. My phone rang. Rachel again. She'd been calling non-stop since I walked out the door yesterday, and up until now, I'd ignored her. But this time, I answered. "Mom, where are you?" She demanded, but her voice wasn't worried. It was irritated, like I'd inconvenienced her. "I needed some time," I said calmly. "Time to process the fact that my daughter mortgaged my home, without my consent while I was caring for my dying husband." "You're being dramatic," Rachel said with a sharp laugh. "This was a financial arrangement that benefits the whole family." Ethan's company is going to be huge, Mum. They're developing AI software for the healthcare industry. Investors are already interested. That last part caught my attention. It was the first concrete detail I'd gotten about Ethan's so-called business. I filed it away in my mind to research later. Rachel, I said, keeping my voice level, what you did was not just unethical, it was probably illegal. I'll be talking to an attorney today to find out exactly what my options are. An attorney? She screeched. You'd really sue your own daughter, your only child. I'm not suing anyone, I said coldly. I'm exploring my legal rights regarding a fraudulent mortgage. The fact that it was done by my daughter is unfortunate, but irrelevant. There was a long pause on the other end. Then Rachel delivered the line she always used to manipulate me. Dad would be so disappointed in you right now. My anger flared hot and sharp. Don't you dare bring your father into this, I snapped. Thomas would be horrified by what you've done, and deep down, you know it. Before she could respond, I hung up. My hands trembled as I placed the phone in my purse. That call confirmed what I already suspected. Rachel had no remorse. None. There would be no reasoning with her. This would have to be fought with hard evidence and legal action. My next stop was the office of Susan Parker, the elder law attorney I'd researched the night before when I first called. Her receptionist told me there were no openings for 2 weeks. But when I briefly explained the situation, they asked me to come in right away. 5 minutes later, I was seated across from Susan herself, a sharp-eyed woman about my age, with a no-nonsense attitude that immediately put me at ease. Margaret, she said, after listening carefully to my story, I wish I could say this was unusual, but sadly, it's not. Financial exploitation by family members is becoming more and more common. She leaned forward, her hands clasped. The good news is, you've acted quickly. Most people don't seek help until the damage is far worse. I nodded. I spent 15 years working in corporate finance before I became a teacher. I recognize fraud when I see it, even if it's my own daughter. Her eyebrows rose slightly. Finance to teaching. That's quite a career change. I wanted a life that fit better with raising a family, I said, the irony bitter on my tongue. All those sacrifices. And for what? Susan gave me a sympathetic look, but didn't dwell on it. Here's what we'll do. First, we file for an emergency injunction to stop any further financial activity involving your property. Then, we challenge the mortgage itself. If your signature was forged or misrepresented, we can have it invalidated. Her tone turned more serious. Finally, we'll report this to Adult Protective Services and pursue elder abuse charges. That gives us additional leverage. I took a deep breath. How long will this take? 3 to 6 months, depending on how aggressively they fight back, she said honestly. But we'll start today. I signed her retainer, agreement without hesitation, authorizing the initial $5,000 payment. It was a lot of money, but I knew it was necessary. As I stood to leave, Susan added, Margaret, document everything. Every conversation, every text message, every piece of paper. Information is your most valuable weapon. Her words struck me, echoing my father's old advice. Information is power. I understand, I told her, and I intend to gather plenty. Back at the motel, I set up a small workspace at the table by the window. I organized my notes, saved screenshots of Rachel's texts, and labeled folders on my laptop. My years of teaching merged with my old finance skills, creating a system that even Thomas would have. Admired Rachel and Ethan thought they were dealing with a grieving widow to overwhelmed. To fight back, they were about to find out just how wrong they were as the sun set. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mrs. Hayes. This is David Chen. I used to work with Ethan on the medical software project. We should talk. Please call me if you're interested. I stared at the message, my heart beating faster. An unexpected ally, maybe even a source of the information I desperately needed. A slow, determined smile spread across my face. The fight had just begun. I didn't sleep much that night. The message from David Chen kept replaying in my mind. Someone who used to work with Ethan, reaching out to me. That meant there were cracks in Ethan's shiny business facade. Cracks I might be able to exploit at sunrise. I was already sitting at the small table in my motel room, sipping weak coffee and staring at my phone. I needed to respond carefully. I typed, "David, this is Margaret Hayes. I received your message. Where and when would you like to meet?" His reply came quickly. "There's a coffee shop in Brookdale, about 20 minutes outside of town. It's public but quiet. Does noon work?" "Noon is fine," I answered. Then tucked my phone away and focused on the day ahead. Before meeting David, I drove back to Coastal Community Bank to check in with Marion. When I walked in, she greeted me warmly. "Good morning, Margaret. I was just about to call you. The insurance funds have cleared." A wave of relief swept over me, all $750,000. She nodded. "Fully available now. What would you like to do with them?" I'd been thinking about this non-stop. I want to move $700,000 to a completely new bank, First Atlantic. No connections to my other accounts. Leave $50,000 here for immediate needs. Marion smiled approvingly. Smart move. Splitting assets will make it harder for anyone to access them without authorization. As I signed the transfer papers, I thought about Thomas Dot. This money was his final gift to me. He'd worked so hard to keep that policy active over the years, even when we could barely afford the premiums. "This would have made him proud," Marion said softly, as if reading my mind. "He always said you were the backbone of your family." Her words brought tears to my eyes, but I blinked them back. "I hope so," I whispered. With the transfer complete, I felt more secure, at least financially, now. It was time to uncover what Ethan was really up to. The coffee shop David had chosen was small and cozy, the kind of place where locals came to read or work on laptops. I parked a block away, just in case anyone recognized my car. Inside, I spotted him right away. David was younger than I expected, probably late 20s. He had a kind, intelligent face, though he looked nervous. "Mrs. Hayes?" he asked, standing as I approached. "Yes, thank you for meeting me." We shook hands, then sat at a corner table. David fidgeted with his coffee cup, clearly uneasy. "I wasn't sure you'd respond," he admitted, "after what happened with Ethan. I didn't know if you'd even want to talk." "I'm curious," I said carefully. "How did you get my number?" He hesitated, then said, "I had access to Green Innovation's internal database before I left. Your information was listed as a potential investor." My stomach clenched. They were planning to ask me for money. "Apparently," he confirmed. "Looks like they decided to skip the asking part and just take it." The bitter truth stung, but I pushed past it. "Why did you leave the company, David?" His expression darkened. "Ethical concerns," he said simply. "When I joined, Ethan promised we'd be developing AI technology to protect patient medical records. That was the vision I signed on for, something that would help people." He paused, clearly upset. But when funding started running low, Ethan shifted the focus. Suddenly, it wasn't about protecting patients. It was about profit and manipulation. "Be specific," I urged. Leaning forward, David glanced around to make sure no one was listening, then lowered his voice. "They created an algorithm to identify patients who would cost healthcare providers too much money, people likely to need expensive treatments that insurance wouldn't fully cover." I frowned, not immediately understanding. "So, what does the company do with that information?" They sell it, David said bluntly, to hospitals, clinics, insurance companies, anyone willing to pay. It lets them avoid treating those patients or push them toward cheaper, less effective options. I stared at him, horrified. That's monstrous. Yes, he agreed. And it's illegal. There are federal laws against this kind of healthcare discrimination. The realization hit me like a punch. This is what my house was mortgaged to fund. David nodded grimly. When I questioned the direction we were going, Ethan fired me. Said I lacked vision. 3 others quit with me. What's left now is just a handful of inexperienced kids fresh out of college. They have no idea what kind of legal quicksand they're in. My mind was spinning. Do you have proof? Anything that shows this shift from the original plan? He reached into his bag and pulled out a flash drive. I saved copies of the original business plan, internal emails, and meeting notes, everything I could before I left. I stared at the small device like it was a weapon, because in many ways it was. Would you be willing to share these with my attorney? That's why I reached out, David said firmly. When I heard Ethan had somehow gotten major funding and that it involved your property, I couldn't stay. Silent, we spent the next hour going through the files on his laptop. The story they told was clear and damning. Green Innovations had started as a legitimate healthcare tech company. But when things got difficult, Ethan deliberately pivoted to an unethical, illegal business model while hiding this change from investors and partners. This company will never succeed, I said, finally. My old finance instincts kicking in. Even if they finished development, the lawsuits would bankrupt them before they could launch. David nodded. That's what I've been saying. But Ethan doesn't care. He just wants the money now. And now my house is tied to this mess, I murmured. David looked pained. I'm sorry. Mrs. Hayes, I really am. You've done the right thing by coming forward, I told him. Your integrity matters, especially in a situation like this. He gave me a small, grateful smile. Back at the motel, I immediately called Susan Parker, my attorney, when I explained what David had shared. Her tone sharpened. This is excellent evidence, she said. If we can prove Ethan knew the business was fraudulent when he secured the mortgage, it strengthens our case tremendously. She promised to file for the emergency injunction. First thing in the morning after hanging up, I checked my phone. 3 new messages from Rachel, all increasingly angry, and one from Ethan himself. Margaret, this drama has gone on long enough. The mortgage is a standard business arrangement. If you keep wasting money on lawyers, you'll only hurt yourself. Be reasonable. The arrogance in his words, the way he used my first name like we were equals, ignited a fire in me. I didn't respond. Instead, I called Linda, my neighbor, who'd been quietly keeping an eye on the house. There's been a lot of activity, she told me immediately. Rachel and Ethan were there last night, moving boxes, and today a young man in a suit was taking photos of the outside. Measuring the yard, too, my grip tightened on the phone. Photos. Measurements. Like a property assessment. That's what it looked like, Linda said. Margaret, I think they're planning to sell the house that night. I couldn't sleep. The image of strangers walking through my home, treating it like theirs to sell, filled me with rage. Thomas and I had poured decades into that house. It wasn't just wood and paint, it was our life. I sat up, staring out the window at the dark parking lot. They thought they had all the power, but they didn't know what I had now. Proof, allies, and a growing plan. Rachel and Ethan had made 2 terrible mistakes. The first was betraying me. The second, and far more dangerous, was underestimating me. Tomorrow, I would start showing them exactly who they were dealing with. Friday morning dawned crisp and cool. The kind of autumn day Thomas and I used to love. Back then, we would have gone apple picking or taken a long drive to watch the leaves turn brilliant shades of red and gold. But this morning, there was no room for nostalgia. Today was about strategy, not sentiment. I packed my laptop and David's flash drive into my bag, then checked out of the motel. I'd spent 4 nights there, and though it wasn't much, it had given me time to think and to plan. With my insurance money safe and evidence against Ethan's company in hand, I was ready for the next phase. It was time to protect myself and go on the offensive. My first stop was Charles Bennett's office, the most experienced real estate attorney in our county. His office was on the 2nd floor of an old colonial building downtown, the kind of place where every creaky stair seemed to hold a century of secrets. Charles himself was in his midst, with sharp eyes and a calm, reassuring demeanor. He greeted me warmly. Double quotes, Mrs. Hayes. Susan filled me in on your situation, he said, motioning me to sit. A troubling case indeed. I need to understand my options regarding the house, I explained. Can I sell it even with this fraudulent mortgage hanging over it? He leaned back, steepling his fingers. The short answer is yes, but there are complications. The mortgage was fraudulently obtained, but until it's legally invalidated, it still exists on record. Any sale would either require paying off that debt from the sale proceeds, or holding the money in escrow while the fraud case is resolved. And if I don't want to keep the house? I asked quietly. Charles studied me. This property has been in your family for decades, hasn't it? Yes, I admitted. My voice caught slightly. Thomas and I bought it the year Rachel was born. Every corner of it is full of memories. But now those memories are tainted. He nodded sympathetically. Then I suggest we pursue 2 tracks. List the house for sale immediately, while simultaneously challenging the mortgage's validity. The listing creates leverage and shows you're taking control of the situation. That made sense. And potential buyers. Would they even consider a house tied up in legal issues, with the right disclosure and a slightly lower price? Yes, he said confidently. Cedar Grove's market is strong. Properties like yours are in demand, for the first time in days. I felt a small spark of hope. Selling the house wasn't just about money, it was about taking back my power. My next stop was Clara Morgan Real Estate, the top agency in town. Clara herself, a nonsense woman in her 50s, greeted me with a warm handshake. Margaret, I've known you and Rachel for years, she said sincerely. I can't believe what was happening. Neither can I said quietly. We sat down in her office, and I explained that I wanted the house listed as soon as possible. Clara worked quickly. Within an hour, we'd agreed on a listing price, $475,000. Slightly below market value to attract immediate attention. She scheduled a photographer for the next morning and promised to have the listing live by Monday. You'll need to disclose the mortgage situation, she warned, but we can frame it carefully. There's still a strong market for homes like yours. As I left her office, I felt more resolved than ever. Every step forward was a step away from Rachel and Ethan's control. Driving home, I called Linda to check in. Her voice was tight with concern. Margaret, you won't believe this. Greg, she caught herself. I mean, Ethan is at your house right now, with 3 men in suits. They've been taking photos and measuring every room. The words made my stomach twist. They're moving ahead with renovations, I said grimly. They're planning to flip my house as if it's already theirs. Exactly, Linda said. Margaret, please be careful. He sounded angry on the phone earlier. He said something about securing the asset before she causes more problems. Her warning only strengthened my resolve. I need to see what's going on for myself. Linda hesitated. At least let me call you in 15 minutes to check in. Promise me you'll leave if things get heated. I promise, I said. Though we both knew I had no intention of backing down, I parked a block away from my own home. The sight of Ethan's sleek silver BMW in my driveway made my blood. Boiled up next to it was a white van with coastal renovations painted on the side. From Linda's garden, I had a clear view through the living room windows. Strangers moved around inside, tape measures in hand, like they owned the place. I took a steadying breath and walked up the familiar path to my red front door. Thomas had insisted on that color, saying, "A home should announce itself with confidence." My hand didn't shake as I turned the key and stepped inside. The conversation inside the kitchen stopped abruptly, for men turned to stare at me. Ethan and 3 contractors. Ethan recovered first, forcing a smile. "Margaret, I didn't expect you. We were just discussing potential updates to the property." "Updates to my property," I corrected, setting my purse down deliberately. "The property you and Rachel mortgaged behind my back while I was at the hospital with my dying husband." The contractors exchanged uneasy glances. Sensing trouble, Ethan waved them toward the door. "Gentlemen, give us a few minutes," as soon as they left. His expression hardened. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he demanded. "Rachel is beside herself. You disappear for days, move money around, hire a lawyer. This stops now." "No." "Ethan," I said calmly, "what stops is your belief that you control me or my assets." I pointed to the countertop where samples of granite and cabinet doors were spread out. "You're making plans for a kitchen remodel I didn't approve. For whose benefit? Certainly not mine." "This is for the family," he said smoothly, his tone condescending. "Your daughter is your heir. This house would eventually be hers anyway. We're just managing the asset. That decision was mine to make," I snapped. "And as of this morning, Rachel is no longer my heir." That made him blink, thrown off balance for the first time. "What are you saying?" "I've updated my will," I said evenly. "Thomas's insurance money is safe, beyond your reach. And on Monday, this house will be officially listed for sale." His face darkened. "You can't sell it. There's a mortgage, a fraudulent mortgage." I cut in. "One currently under investigation by both my attorney and the bank's fraud department." The mention of the fraud investigation clearly rattled him. I stepped closer, my voice steady. "Let me be clear. What you and Rachel did was fraud. Elder abuse. A betrayal so profound I still can't fully comprehend it. But your worst mistake wasn't the crime itself." He glared at me. "Oh yeah. And what was that?" "Underestimating me." At that moment, my phone rang. "Linda, right on schedule." Double quotes. "Yes." "I'm fine," I said into the phone, keeping my eyes locked on Ethan. "I'll be there shortly," hanging up. I grabbed my purse and turned to him. "The contractors can leave," I said. "There will be no renovations. Tomorrow, a photographer will be here to prepare the listing. You think Rachel will just let this happen?" Ethan snarled. "You think I'll let this happen? You have no choice." He leaned closer, his tone turning threatening. "People will believe us, Margaret. A grieving widow, confused and unstable after losing her husband. Who are they going to believe? You or your concerned daughter and her husband?" The implication hit me like a blow. "You're planning to claim I'm mentally incompetent," I said flatly. "Only if you force our hand," he replied with a chilling smile. "Think carefully." I walked out without another word, my steps steady even as my heart pounded outside. Linda was waiting. "You're pale as a sheet," she said, ushering me into her house. "They're prepared to challenge my mental competence." I told her, "They'll do whatever it takes to keep control." "That's vile," Linda said fiercely. "Margaret, you're one of the sharpest women I know." Her faith in me was a bomb. But I knew what needed to be done now. Documentation. I sat at her kitchen table, and wrote down everything, Ethan's exact words, his tone, his threats. Susan had told me that contemporaneous notes were essential, and I wasn't about to forget a single detail. By the time I finished, my fear had transformed into cold, clear determination. Rachel and Ethan had shown me exactly who they were now. I would show them exactly who I was. The next morning, I woke before dawn, my mind racing with everything that needed to be done. The house would be photographed today, and the listing would go live tomorrow. Rachel and Ethan were likely plotting their next move at this very moment, and I couldn't afford to be one step behind. I had to stay ahead of them, Thomas used to say. Margaret, if you want to win, don't just play defense. Play offense. Those words echoed in my head as I dressed in my simplest, sharpest clothes. I wanted to look composed and competent, especially since Rachel and Ethan were clearly planning to paint me as unstable. At 8 a.m., I met Clara Morgan, my realtor, at the house. The photographer was already there, setting up a tripod in the living room. Seeing him move through the rooms, capturing angles and light, was bittersweet. Every corner held memories. The worn patch of carpet where Thomas always sat to play with our dog. The doorway with Rachel's childhood height markings still faintly visible. Clara noticed my expression. "Are you sure about this, Margaret?" she asked gently. I swallowed hard. Yes, this house stopped being a safe place the moment Rachel betrayed me. I won't let them use it against me any longer. She nodded and squeezed my hand. "You're doing the right thing." As we walked through the rooms, I made sure to point out small details, the new roof Thomas had insisted on last year, the upgraded plumbing we'd invested in years ago. These would matter to potential buyers. By the time the photographer packed up, Clara's phone was buzzing. "That was fast," she said with a small smile. "I've already got 3 agents asking for private showings once the listing goes live." "Good," I said firmly. "The faster this sells, the sooner I'm free of Rachel and Ethan's grip." Back at Linda's house, I set up my temporary workspace on her kitchen table. She placed a cup of tea beside me, her face full of concern. "You've been running non-stop," she said softly. "When's the last time you ate something, Margaret?" "I'll grab a bite later," I promised, though my stomach was too tight with nerves for food. Right now, I need to go over David's files again before meeting Susan. Linda sat across from me. "I still can't believe Rachel would do this," she said. Shaking her head, "I watched her grow up, Margaret. She used to be such a sweet girl." "People change," I said bitterly. "Or maybe they just show their true colors when money's involved." Linda hesitated, then asked, "Do you think Ethan pushed her into this?" I considered the question carefully. Ethan definitely masterminded it. But Rachel? She didn't fight him. She went along willingly. That truth hurt more than anything at 10 sharp. I arrived at Susan Parker's law office. She greeted me with her usual brisk efficiency, then ushered me into her private conference room. "I've reviewed the documents David provided," she began. "This is damning evidence, Margaret. Ethan's company isn't just unethical, it's blatantly illegal." "I knew it was bad," I said, but seeing it in black and white made me sick. Susan nodded grimly. "Here's what we're doing today. Filing for an emergency injunction to freeze any action related to your house. That includes renovations, refinancing, or sale attempts by Rachel and Ethan." Relief washed over me. "So they can't move forward while this is pending?" "Exactly," she confirmed. "And once the judge grants it, which I expect given the evidence will proceed." With a full fraud complaint, she slid a stack of papers across the table. "These are affidavits. Sign them, and we'll have everything we need." As I signed each page, my hands were steady. Every signature felt like reclaiming a piece of my life. Midway through the meeting, Susan's assistant knocked and handed her a message slip. Susan's expression darkened as she read it. Margaret, it appears Ethan has already contacted an attorney. That was expected, I said calmly. It gets worse, she continued. He's alleging that you're mentally incompetent and therefore unable to manage your own affairs. My stomach dropped. Even though I'd suspected this was coming. He's really going through with that, yes, Susan said grimly. He'll likely try to have Rachel appointed as your guardian, giving her full control of your finances. The audacity of it left me momentarily speechless. But then a strange calm settled over me. Then we'll prove them wrong, I said firmly. Schedule a psychological evaluation. Independent. Document everything. I want no room for doubt. Susan's eyes gleamed with approval. That's exactly the right move. We'll also bring in statements from people who know you well. Linda, Marion, at the bank. Anyone who can attest to your competence. I thought of Linda's unwavering support and felt a surge of gratitude. She'd do it without hesitation. Good, Susan said. Now, let's talk about David. David arrived a few minutes later, looking nervous but determined. He sat across from Susan and me, carefully placing a folder of printed documents on the table. This, he said, is a complete timeline of Ethan's pivot from legitimate business practices to fraud. Emails, meeting notes, financial records, everything. Susan scanned a few pages and whistled softly. Mr. Chen, this is remarkable work. You've essentially built our case for us. David flushed, slightly. I couldn't just stand by while innocent people were hurt. Margaret's home isn't the only asset Ethan's exploiting. What do you mean? I asked sharply. David hesitated. He's been taking money from multiple sources. Elderly investors, small business grants, even fake clinical trial funds. My breath caught. How much money are we talking about? Conservatively, David said, 500,000, maybe more. The room fell silent. Even Susan looked shocked. This, she said finally, is no longer just a civil case. It's criminal. Susan excused herself to make a call. Leaving David and me alone, I turned to him, my voice low. Why didn't you go straight to the police with this? I considered it, he admitted. But without legal guidance, I was afraid Ethan would twist it. He is persuasive, and he has friends in high places. I nodded slowly. You did the right thing coming here first. We'll make sure this gets to the right people. When Susan returned, her expression was serious but determined. I've spoken with Detective Reynolds at the Cedar Grove Police Department. She specializes in financial crimes. She's agreed to review the evidence personally. My pulse quickened. Will they arrest him? Not yet, Susan cautioned. They'll need to build a solid case. But this is a very strong start. After David left, Susan turned back to me. Margaret, this next part is crucial. Ethan and Rachel will likely escalate. They may try to contact you directly, or even confront you. They already have, I said, telling her about Ethan's threats the day before. Her expression hardened. Document everything. If he threatens you again, call 911 immediately. I nodded. I understand. Good. Now, let's prepare for Monday's hearing. That's when we'll request the injunction. Back at Linda's house, I sat with a fresh cup of tea and my notebook open. Rachel had sent another flurry of texts. Mum, you're blowing this way out of proportion. Please come home so we can talk. Ethan is furious. You're putting us all in danger. If you go through with this, you'll regret it. I stared at those last words. You'll regret it. It wasn't quite a threat. Not one you could take to the police, but it was close. Linda peered over my shoulder. That's intimidation. Pure and simple, she said. Exactly why I'm saving every message, I replied, taking screenshots and emailing them to myself for safekeeping. As evening fell, I sat alone, thinking about everything I'd learned. Ethan's company wasn't just failing. It was rotten to the core. Rachel wasn't just misguided, she was complicit. And me. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a force they'd have to reckon with. For the first time in weeks, I felt something like peace, not because the fight was over, far from it, but because I finally knew who my enemies were and what they were capable of. I closed my notebook and whispered to the empty room. Thomas, I'm going to fix this. I swear it. Monday morning arrived, heavy and grey. The kind of day that felt like a storm was coming. And in a way, it was. Today would be the first courtroom battle. Susan had filed the emergency injunction late Friday, and this morning we would appear before Judge Anderson to argue why Rachel and Ethan must be stopped from taking any further action on the house. As I dressed carefully, navy blazer, cream blouse, sensible shoes, I thought of what was at stake: my home, my independence, my dignity. Rachel and Ethan weren't just trying to steal my house. They were trying to erase me, to paint me as a confused, fragile widow unfit to manage her own affairs. If they succeeded, they'd control everything. Not today. Linda insisted on driving me to the courthouse. She fussed over me like a mother hen as we rode in her old station wagon. You've got this. Margaret, she said firmly, gripping my hand at a stoplight. Judge Anderson is a fair woman. She won't fall for their lies. I hope you're right, I murmured, though a knot of worry sat heavy in my stomach. Rachel had always been charming when she wanted to be. She could turn on the tears at will, play the devoted daughter with sickening ease. As we pulled into the courthouse parking lot, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Susan, already inside. Ethan and Rachel are here. Stay calm and let me do most of the talking. I texted back a single word. Understood. The courthouse was bustling with Monday morning activity. Attorneys hurrying with briefcases. Families gathered for custody hearings. Nervous individuals waiting for their names to be called. Susan met us outside the courtroom, radiating calm confidence in her tailored grey suit. She hugged me briefly. Remember, Margaret, keep your answers simple and direct. No speculation, no emotion if you can help it. I nodded, breathing deeply. Let's do this. When we entered the courtroom, my heart clenched. Rachel was seated at the table opposite ours, wearing a soft blue dress, the same shade she'd worn to her high school graduation. A calculated choice, meant to evoke innocence and nostalgia. Ethan sat beside her in a sharp suit, his expression smug. He looked like a man convinced he'd already won. Rachel's eyes met mine briefly, and for a moment I saw something, not remorse, but a flicker of unease. Then her face smoothed into a mask of false concern. Judge Anderson entered, and everyone rose. She was a tall, commanding woman in her early 60s, with keen eyes that missed nothing. Please be seated, she said, her voice firm. Susan began by presenting our request. An immediate freeze on any actions related to my home due to the fraudulent mortgage. Your Honor, she said clearly. My client's signature was forged while she was at the hospital caring for her terminally ill husband. We have evidence that her daughter and son-in-law conspired to secure this mortgage. Without her knowledge or consent, she slid a folder of documents to the bailiff. These include handwriting analysis reports and bank transaction records. Ethan's attorney, a slick man named Brian Cooper, shot to his feet. Your Honor, he said smoothly. This is nothing more than a family misunderstanding. My clients merely helped Mrs. Hayes manage her finances during a difficult time. She's grieving, confused, and unfortunately, lashing out. I clenched my fists under the table, forcing myself to stay silent. Susan's tone was icy as she responded. Confused? Mrs. Hayes spent 15 years working in corporate finance before becoming a teacher. She's more than capable of managing her affairs. Perhaps in the past, Brian countered. But grief can cloud judgment. We have evidence that Mrs. Hayes has been behaving erratically, disappearing for days, hiding money, making impulsive decisions. He gestured toward me dramatically. Our concern is for her well-being. Rachel Hayes only wants to protect her mother. Rachel dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, playing her part perfectly. "Mom, please," she said in a trembling voice. "You know I'd never hurt you. We just want to make sure you're safe." The gall of it nearly took my breath away. I wanted to shout, to list every betrayal, every lie, but Susan's warning echoed in my mind. "Stay calm." Judge Anderson turned to me. Double quotes, "Mrs. Hayes, would you like to speak?" I stood slowly, meeting the judge's gaze. "Your Honor," I said, my voice steady, while my husband lay dying. "My daughter used my house, my only real asset, to fund her husband's failing business. She did this without my consent and forged my signature to make it happen." I took a breath, willing my emotions to stay contained. This isn't about grief. It's about betrayal and theft. The courtroom was silent, except for the scratching of the court reporter's pen. Susan then introduced David Chen as a witness. He walked to the stand, clearly nervous but resolute. "Mr. Chen," Susan began, "can you describe your role at Green Innovations?" "I was a software developer," he said. "I worked there for 2 years before leaving due to ethical concerns. Please explain to the court what you discovered." David outlined everything: the illegal algorithm, the fraudulent business practices, the money Ethan had funneled from multiple sources, and Mrs. Hayes' house. Susan prompted. "How did that come into play?" "Ethan bragged about securing funding without having to convince an investor," David said. He said, and I quote, "Family money is the easiest money." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Rachel's face flushed crimson. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. When Brian cross-examined David, he tried to paint him as a disgruntled former employee, but David held firm, answering calmly and providing clear details that matched the documents Susan had submitted by the time he stepped down. There was no doubt in anyone's mind. Ethan's company wasn't just risky. It was a scam. Judge Anderson called for a brief recess as we stepped into the hallway. Susan leaned close to me. "We're doing well," she whispered. "The judge is clearly leaning our way." Linda squeezed my arm. "Margaret, you were incredible in there." Before I could respond, Rachel approached. Her face twisted with anger. "How could you do this to me?" she hissed. "You're humiliating me in front of everyone." "Humiliating you?" I said coldly. "You stole my house, Rachel. You and Ethan did this to yourselves." Ethan stepped between us, his voice low and threatening. "This isn't over. You think a temporary freeze will stop us? We'll find another way." I met his glare head-on. "Try it," I said. "You'll regret it." Back in the courtroom, Judge Anderson delivered her ruling. "Given the compelling evidence of fraud," she said, "I am granting the emergency injunction. All actions related to the mortgage are frozen effective immediately." Relief flooded through me. It wasn't a final victory, but it was a crucial first step. Brian tried to protest. "Your Honor, my clients are deeply concerned about Mrs. Hayes' mental state." Judge Anderson cut him off sharply. "Unless you have concrete medical evidence, I will not entertain unfounded allegations." Do I make myself clear? Brian's mouth snapped shut. "Yes, Your Honor." As we exited the courthouse, Susan turned to me with a rare smile. "Well done, Margaret. You kept your composure and let the facts speak for themselves." "Now what?" I asked, already thinking ahead. "Now we prepare for the next phase," she said. "The fraud investigation will continue, and Detective Reynolds will be in touch soon." Linda drove us home, chattering excitedly about how well things had gone, but I remained quiet, staring out the window, because I knew Rachel and Ethan wouldn't stop here. They'd been cornered, and cornered people are dangerous. The fight wasn't over, it was just beginning. That evening, I sat at Linda's kitchen table, organizing the day's notes. Rachel had sent more texts, this time dripping with venom. "You made a fool of me today. Dad would hate you for this. You've destroyed our family. Mom, I hope you're happy." I stared at the last message for a long time before deleting it. Rachel wasn't my daughter anymore, not in any way that mattered. As I turned off my phone, I made myself a silent promise. I will see this through to the end, no matter how long it takes, no matter what it costs. For Thomas, for myself, for justice. The following morning, the air felt different. The storm clouds had cleared, leaving behind a pale blue sky. But tension clung to me like humidity. The emergency injunction had stopped Rachel and Ethan from taking immediate action. But Susan warned me this victory would provoke them. "They'll come at you harder now," she'd said, as we parted ways outside the courthouse. "They've been backed into a corner, Margaret. And people in that position can do unpredictable things." I believed her. Rachel's late night texts were proof enough. The sweet, reasonable tone she used when she wanted something was gone, replaced by venom and blame. Last night's final message still echoed in my mind. "You've ruined everything. Don't think we won't fight back." I woke up early and sat at Linda's kitchen table, sipping coffee and staring at my growing stack of documents. There were files from Susan, copies of David's evidence, printouts of Rachel's threatening messages, and neatly labeled folders of bank statements. Thomas would have been proud of my organization. It was a small comfort, imagining his steady presence beside me, encouraging me to keep going. Linda came in, her robe cinched tightly around her waist. "You didn't sleep much," she observed, pouring herself coffee. "No," I admitted, "too much on my mind." "You've been running on fumes for weeks," she said gently. "At some point, you have to rest." "I will," I promised, though we both knew it wasn't true. There was no room for rest yet, not while Rachel and Ethan were plotting. Their next move, morning. Susan called with news. "Detective Reynolds wants to meet with you today," she said. "She's reviewed the initial evidence and believes it's strong, enough to open a formal investigation." My pulse quickened. What does that mean, exactly? "It means law enforcement is officially involved," Susan explained. "Once that happens, things move quickly. But Margaret, you need to understand, this could get messy. Rachel and Ethan might face criminal charges." I hesitated, my throat tightening. Rachel was still my daughter. Part of me wanted to shield her, to believe she'd been manipulated by Ethan. But deep down, I knew better. She'd chosen this path. "Let's meet with the detective," I said finally. "The truth needs to come out, no matter how painful." Detective Reynolds' office was inside the Cedar Grove police station. She was a tall woman with sharp eyes and an air of quiet authority. "Mrs. Hayes," she said warmly, shaking my hand. "I've read through the files Susan provided. It's clear you've been through a nightmare." "That's putting it mildly," I said wryly. We sat across from her desk as she laid out the next steps. "Here's what we're dealing with," she began. "Ethan's company took funds under false pretenses. That's wire fraud. The forged mortgage documents. That's forgery and elder financial exploitation. And if Rachel was complicit, she's looking at charges too." Hearing it laid out so bluntly made my stomach twist, even though I wanted justice. It was still my daughter we were talking about. "Do you have enough evidence to arrest them?" Susan asked. "Not yet," Detective Reynolds said, "but we're close. We'll need statements from you, Mrs. Hayes, and from David Chen. We'll also subpoena Ethan's financial records." She turned to me. "Are you willing to give a detailed statement today?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "I've documented everything." As I recounted the events, the hospital stay, Rachel's betrayal, Ethan's threats, I felt strangely detached, like I was describing someone else's life. But when I spoke about Thomas, my voice faltered. While I was holding my husband's hand as he took his last breath, I said, tears pricking my eyes, my daughter was stealing my future. Detective Reynolds' expression softened. We'll do everything we can to make this right. Mrs. Hayes, when we left the station, Susan seemed pleased. This was a good step, she said. The detective believes you, and she's moving fast. I nodded, though my mind was already spinning with what Rachel might do when she realized the police were involved. That answer came sooner than expected. We had just returned to Linda's house when my phone buzzed. It was a call from an unfamiliar number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Mom, Rachel's voice came through, high-pitched and frantic. How could you go to the police? Do you know what you've done? Rachel, you left me no choice, I said evenly. You forged my signature. You stole from me. You don't understand. She sobbed. Ethan was desperate. If this company fails, everything falls apart. We'll lose the house, the cars, everything. You mean my house? I corrected coldly. And maybe that's exactly what needs to happen. Her sobbing stopped abruptly when she spoke again. Her tone was icy. If you do this, you'll never see me or the kids again. The words hit me like a blow. For a moment, my resolve wavered. I thought of my grandchildren, their smiles, their laughter. But then I remembered Rachel's cold eyes as she'd calmly explained how she'd mortgaged my home without telling me. I love my grandchildren, I said quietly, but I won't let you use them as weapons against me. I hung up before she could respond, my hands trembling. Linda watched me closely. What did she say? She's trying to manipulate me, I said, sinking into a chair, threatening to cut me off from the kids. That's cruel, Linda said, her voice tight with anger. She's desperate, Margaret. Desperate people make mistakes. Her words sparked an idea in my mind. If Rachel was panicking, she might slip up, say or do something we could use against her. Later that afternoon, Clara Morgan called with an update about the house listing. You won't believe this, she said. I've had 6 offers already, and the listing hasn't even gone live yet. My heart leaped. That's incredible news. Clara hesitated, but there's something strange. One of the offers came from an LLC with no clear owner. The bid is $50,000 over asking price, all cash. I froze. That's Ethan, I said immediately. He's trying to buy the house back through a shell company. That was my thought too, Clara admitted. What should we do? Reject it, I said firmly. We don't play their games. As I hung up, I realized just how far Ethan was willing to go. He was trying to regain control in any way he could, legally or not. That evening, Susan stopped by with news of her own. The detective subpoenaed Ethan's bank records. She told me they show large cash withdrawals and transfers to offshore accounts. Money laundering, I said grimly. Exactly, Susan confirmed. This case is growing by the day. Once the FBI sees these numbers, it'll escalate to federal charges. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. I wanted justice, but federal charges meant Rachel could end up in prison alongside Ethan. Susan seemed to read my mind. Margaret, you didn't put Rachel here. She made these choices. I nodded slowly. You're right. But knowing that doesn't make it easier. Late that night, as Linda slept, I sat alone in the darkened kitchen. My phone buzzed with a single text from an unknown number. No words, just a photo. The image made my blood run cold. It was my house, the front door wide open, lights blazing inside. I called Linda immediately, my voice shaking. Wake up. Something's happening at the house. We rushed over, but by the time we arrived, the door was closed again. Nothing seemed disturbed, yet a chill ran through me. On the porch was a note, written in a familiar hand. "Stop this now, or you'll be sorry," Linda gasped. "This has gone too far. You need to call Detective Reynolds." "I will," I said, tucking the note carefully into a plastic bag. "But this proves we're getting to them. They're scared. Scared people do dangerous things," Linda warned. "I know," I said quietly, "but so do I." As we drove back to Linda's house, I felt a strange sense of clarity. The lines were drawn. There would be no reconciliation, no forgiveness, only war. The sun hadn't even risen when I sat at Linda's kitchen table, staring at the threatening note left on my porch. The words were burned into my mind. "Stop this now, or you'll be sorry." I didn't need to guess who had written it. The slanted, dramatic handwriting was unmistakably Rachel's. It was both terrifying and heartbreaking proof that my daughter had crossed a line she could never come back. From Linda placed a steaming mug of tea in front of me. "You didn't sleep at all," she said softly. "How could I murmured, rubbing my temples. "Rachel isn't just making bad choices anymore, Linda. She's dangerous. She's desperate," Linda corrected gently. "And desperate people are the most dangerous of all." I took a sip of tea. Forcing myself to focus today wasn't about fear. Today was about finishing this fight once and for all. At 8 a.m., Susan Parker called with urgent news. "Margaret, we've got movement," she said, her voice brisk. Detective Reynolds took the threatening note straight to her captain. "This officially escalates to a criminal harassment case, which strengthens our overall case significantly." "That's good," I said, though my chest tightened with anxiety. "What happens now?" "Reynolds will serve Rachel and Ethan with a formal notice to appear for questioning," Susan explained. "Once that happens, they'll know law enforcement is closing in." I gripped the phone tightly. "Susan, they already know. Last night was proof of that." Her tone turned serious. "Margaret, listen to me. You need to stay somewhere safe tonight. Linda's house is good, but maybe consider a hotel further out of town, just until the arrest warrants are issued." "No," I said firmly. "I won't run from my own life. If they want to come after me, they'll have to look me in the eye." Susan sighed but didn't argue. "Then at least keep your phone charged and your doors locked." "I will," I promised later that morning. Clara Morgan called about the house listing. "You won't believe the traffic," she said, excitement in her voice. "Since going live, we've had 8 showings and 4 more offers." "That's wonderful," I said, relieved. It felt like a lifeline, a reminder that I still had control over something. "But Margaret," Clara added carefully, "2 of the showings were odd. The buyers didn't ask normal questions. One even took photos of paperwork lying on the counter." A cold chill ran through me. That was Ethan's doing. He's sending people to gather information. "That's what I thought too," Clara admitted. "Don't worry. I've added extra precautions. No one comes in without me there." "Thank you," I said, gratitude flooding my voice. "Please be careful." By midday, Detective Reynolds arrived at Linda's house with an update. She was carrying a thick folder, and her expression was grim. "We've confirmed Ethan's offshore accounts," she said, spreading documents across the table. "This isn't just local fraud anymore. It's federal. The FBI is officially involved." Linda gasped. "Federal? What does that mean for Margaret?" "It means we're building a much larger case," Reynolds explained. "But it also means things are going to get rough before they get better." I frowned. "How rough?" Reynolds met my gaze. "Ethan knows the walls are closing in. He'll either try to flee with the money or destroy as much evidence as possible. Rachel, she might try to make a deal for herself." My stomach twisted. "You think she'd turn on him?" "If it means saving herself, Yes, Reynolds said bluntly. She's scared. People like her don't go down quietly. That evening, I decided to go to my house one last time. Not to fight, not to argue, just to say goodbye. Linda begged me not to go alone, so she came with me as we walked through the familiar rooms. Memories flooded back. Thomas reading by the fireplace, Rachel's laughter echoing. Down the hall as a child, the smell of Sunday dinners in the kitchen. This house was our whole life, I whispered, tears slipping down my cheeks. But it's not a home anymore. It's a battlefield. Linda squeezed my hand. You'll build a new home, Margaret. One filled with peace. I nodded, wiping my eyes. But in my heart, I knew this chapter had to end here tonight. When we returned to Susan was waiting with urgent news. The judge has approved the warrant, she announced. Reynolds and her team are preparing to arrest both Rachel and Ethan first thing tomorrow morning. My breath caught. It's really happening, yes, Susan said firmly, but you need to be prepared. Once they're arrested, there will be chaos. The media might get involved. Your family's dirty laundry will be very public. I don't care about gossip, I said. I care about justice. Susan smiled faintly. That's exactly why we're going to win. At dawn the next day, I sat by the window, waiting. The house was silent except for the ticking clock on Linda's wall. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Detective Reynolds. Warrants executed. Both in custody. You're safe now. I exhaled a shaky breath. Safe. For the first time in months. I truly felt it. Linda burst into tears of relief. They're really gone. Yes, I said, hugging her tightly. It's over. But as the sun rose higher, I realized it wasn't quite over yet. There was still the house sale, the legal proceedings, the rebuilding of my life. But the danger, the immediate threat, was gone. 2 weeks later, I sat in Judge Anderson's courtroom once again. Rachel and Ethan sat at the defense table. Looking pale and defeated, Rachel wouldn't meet my eyes. Ethan glared at me with pure hatred. Detective Reynolds testified about the fraudulent accounts. David Chen presented his evidence clearly and calmly. And Susan tied everything together in a closing argument that left no doubt. Rachel and Ethan were guilty when the judge delivered her ruling. Her voice was firm and final. The court finds sufficient evidence of fraud, elder financial exploitation, and criminal conspiracy. The mortgage is hereby invalidated. The defendants will face trial on the criminal charges. Relief surged through me like a wave. It was done. My house was mine again. My name cleared outside the courthouse. Rachel finally approached me. Her face was blotchy from crying. "Mum," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please, don't let them send me to prison." I stared at her, my heart aching. For a moment, I saw the little girl she used to be, before greed and Ethan had twisted her. "I can't save you from the consequences of your choices," I said softly. "I already tried to save you, Rachel. You chose this path." Her tears flowed harder, but I turned and walked away. Some bridges are too burned to ever rebuild. A month later, the house sold for slightly over asking price. Clara handled everything smoothly, ensuring every detail was perfect. When I signed the final papers, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. That house had held my entire life, but now it was time to start fresh. With the proceeds from the sale and Thomas's insurance money, I bought a small, cozy cottage by the lake. It wasn't grand, but it was mine, and it was peaceful. On my first night in the new house, Linda joined me for tea. We sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the water in shades of gold. "You did it," she said softly. "You fought back, and you won." "I survived," I corrected gently. but it doesn't feel like winning. Not when I lost my daughter in the process. Linda reached over and squeezed my hand. Sometimes survival is the victory. I gazed out at the horizon. Thinking of Thomas, I wished he were there beside me. Seeing this new chapter of my life, I hope you're proud of me. I whispered to the fading light, because I finally learned to stand on my own, and for the first time in a long while, I felt at peace. The war was over, but the lesson remained. Family can be your greatest strength or your greatest betrayal, and when that betrayal comes, you must decide who you are. I was Margaret Hayes, a wife, a mother, a survivor, and now, finally, my own person again.